But as I say, I will run through it fairly quickly. If I'm going too quick, get it slowed down, have a chat with me. Very happy to pick up questions as we go through. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover the foundations of the Mac OS, where it started, compare it to a bit of Linux. We're going to go through the traditional stuff such as the Mac file system, and we're going to cover a GUI interface for the Mac, which is really what the Mac is all about. So Mac versus Linux. Okay, well, why is there a little bit of a competition here? Mac versus Linux. We probably spoke about this when we did some of the Linux stuff and when we talked about operating systems as a whole. Okay, Mac environment used to be or derives from that, essentially that same Linux core code that was basically produced. So we will see a lot of similarities with the Mac Apple environment that we saw when we did the Linux session, last session, wasn't it? Okay, you'll notice a lot of the language is pretty similar that we use. And certainly when we work in the terminal environment, yeah, you're going to see an awful lot of similarities. Okay, so we know Unix was basically created in 1960 by American telephones, and telegraph company, so AT&T. Able to run on different types of hardware, freely available. Versions of Unix came out, and that's shareware. So that's all free, lovely, and we spoke about that the other week. So the big difference between that and the Mac environment is that Mac was founded on that sort of similar, basically, idea. But that is where it kind of separates, okay? So many of these, say, the terminals and stuff will be exactly the same. Terminal commands will be the same. But what Apple basically did was they converted it into a closed source system. You are not allowed to take the macOS kernel and basically have a tinker with it and play with it and make any adjustments, okay? It is a closed source system. There's a bonus, by the way, for anyone who can recognize the Mac on that screen. Please throw it into live chat if you can basically think of what it is. And we have a couple of these throughout the content. Look at that, an iMac. It's an old 24-inch iMac. And this, in fact, is the iMac that I was reinstalling. I basically installed a Linux or Unix system basically onto. Remember, we talked about putting Mint onto it, didn't I? Thank you very much, Marcos. Are you a Mac person, Marcos? Yes. Okay. Anyone who uses a Mac all the time, please chip into the live chats. Okay. If you use it constantly all the time, hints, tips that you're going to be able to tell people as we go through the presentations and stuff. Very happy to have those thrown into live chat. It will be really useful to get some of that feedback as well. So macOS, some of the pros and cons of having a closed source items are. Pros are really around the availability of package updates. So there is a closed repository for the available packages. This makes it very easy to get decent software from. Cons, sometimes Apple is criticized about how slowly it introduces new features. Okay, since no one but Apple can build new features, it's not like the Linux stuff, the Unix end of things, where everyone is basically diving in and making changes. It's only Apple that's changing it. So it's kind of like a single core that's basically getting changed all the time. So it can be a little bit slow to react, a little bit slow for adding new features. Pro, Apple makes its own hardware. Physically, Apple basically produces its own hardware, and this means that the Mac OS itself basically is only running on its own hardware. Okay, so straight away, we don't have a compatibility issue. Straight away, we don't have to say, oh my God, what processor is it we're running? You know, what chips of memory are basically in there? Possibly there may be some flaky memory that's running on PCs. You know, what motherboard is it? Well, we don't have all that conversation. It's Mac OS. It's tested very hard on Mac hardware. So we do not have those compatibility issues. The cons of that are basically that the Macs are a little bit more expensive than other computers. So they're a little bit more pricey, okay? And that kind of pushed it out. And that's really what, in my opinion, I have lots of opinions nowadays, my opinion, that's really what pushed Apple away from being the core product like Microsoft is. Okay, because the Windows environment, as we said, took about 78% of the business environment. Apple kind of went, well, specialists are going to use that, people that do DTP products. kind of drifted down the Apple end of things, and people, of course, who hate Microsoft. So it's that sort of split you get, don't you? So Pro, because the Mac and Linux systems are not as widely used as PCs, they're less targeted by malicious actors. Anyone who wants to get loads of money out of a company doesn't go, I'm going to target, that 15 to 18% of the Apple environment. They're going to go, well, let's go for the big 78%. They're going to take that chunk and attack those ones. And one of the cons is Apple has been known sometimes to be more restrictive or controlling in what they allow developers to do. And we talk a little bit about that when we come to the App Store and what basically can get released onto the App Store. So let's have a little look at the Mac. Okay, you can basically see there on the Mac, we have a variety of tools around there. We will give you a spin round as well. We have what's known as a Mac dock. The docker basically runs at the bottom. Okay, Mac has a dynamic dock, so you can do some fun things with it. You can see docked applications, running applications are the ones with the dots by them, downloaded folders, bin, yes, and we can see that down here. But we can also have this as a dynamic one, so we can get it resized in a different flavor. So you see Apple kind of takes what we'd normally consider to be a sensible idea and goes, oh, let's make it flash. Let's make it really intellectual. Let's make it a little bit more jazzy, I think is probably a good word to use. Okay, so that is the dock. So if anyone asks you where the dock is, which we will ask you in a minute, that is where the dock is. The menu bars, we're all pretty familiar with menu bars. They do differ very slightly. Okay, we have an Apple menu that gives us some details on the Apple menu. We have an active application menu. Now, one big difference between the Apple environment and the Windows environment is when you're running an Apple environment, the application you are currently running is always at the top left. So now it doesn't matter where your window is. You can see here at the top left, I think you can see the mouse moving, is Chrome. Doesn't matter where my window is. I can have a window minimized down the bottom. I can have it on a different screen. That Chrome menu will always be at the top left. Whereas on a Windows environment, that moves with the window. So if I move the Chrome window on a Mac, on a PC environment or Windows environment, that menu stays with that window. It isn't always at the top. So that is a big difference on one of the systems. Now, of course, the Apple menu basically allows us to bring up details about this Mac, system settings. You can see there it tells us there's one update available. We can get the App Store, recently used menus, and we can do lots of other things on that menu. So it's a bit like the Start menu for Windows, which is normally down the bottom left. Along with the application menu across the top, to the right-hand side, you get a status menu. The status menu contains some really useful things. Yeah, battery status. We'd see that at the bottom right-hand side on the Windows environment, don't we? Network status, again, that's bottom right-hand side on Windows. Spotlight. Spotlight is really lovely, and we'll talk a little bit about the Spotlight later. We have a control center that allows us to dip into the control center directly from the GUI environment rather than having to go through a variety of keystrokes or basically pick it from a menu. And we have our date and time. Now the window controls are also slightly different as well. We have a red dot for closing that particular window, yellow dot for minimize with a minus across it, and we have a maximize and a restore. With the maximize and restore, there's also window options for going full screen or basically tiling it on the left or the right. Okay, these are all basically available on the Windows. In Windows nowadays, you can drag it to the right, drag it to the left, drag it to the top, and you get different options. You can do those similar things on the Mac, but this gives it available on the menu bar directly. And we have an open and close tab on the right-hand side. Now, I said we'd talk about the Spotlight. Spotlight, I love the Spotlight. It's great. It's fantastic because it allows you literally to search for anything. Your Spotlight bar, you can basically open the Spotlight bar. You can type in anything there. The example I've used there is I've typed in iTunes. Straight away, it pops up a load of suggestions for me. It says you're after the iTunes app, you're after iTunes Store. Do you want to basically look at it on the browser? Would you like to look at a TV? So it gives you loads and loads of different options there. It is so easy. Anything you want to do, you click on that and go, this is what I want. And it goes, oh, is this what you're talking about? And it kind of goes, yeah or no. And you pick something else. So it is a great suggestion. Pretty much the same as the search for Windows. Yes, very, very similar. I just think the Mac was the first one that was out there. So we love it. Well, I like it anyway. We can literally quickly demo it. Spotlight bar, bang. Any particular thing someone wants me to search for? Please remember, we need to keep it clean. So anyone fancy throwing something in the chat window they want me to look for? Spotify. Type a few things in, and straight away it's come up with Spotify, it's coming up with Siri Spotlights, other particular options. So you see just how easy it is basically to get to where you want to go. And we have a system settings in the Mac as well. We've basically seen this basically across the bottom of our bars. Oh, will it give it to me again? Or has it decided not to play? So we can go into system settings. And from our system settings, that is where we tend to control a lot of our systems. And again, we can go to the menu, see at the top, always at the top, and I can basically do quit system settings. Did you see the panic in my eyes there? I thought for a minute then I just lost the presentation, but it's still there. Always there somewhere, isn't it, on the Mac? Okay. You will notice on the system settings, and indeed on the spotlight bar, you can basically see things such as software updates. Okay, you'll get a little notification about messages. It's number 1 here that tells us, oh, there's something in system settings I need to go and pay attention to. When I come into the system settings, it says I have an update. So we can get some very useful information just essentially from our bar. And indeed, you can see at the bottom here, I've got some notifications in Slack. Very similar to you see on an iPhone. You get a little 1 by the side of it, 2, 3, depending on how many notifications you've got. And it does that for all the applications. Now, if you're not using the Spotlight bar and you know you want to run an application, well, we have a Launchpad. The Launchpad itself will allow you to bring up a set menu that will tell you what applications you have available to run, and you can run them. So it simply pops up and gives you the details about what you can and cannot run. As I say, any questions, please go ahead. Yeah, Paul, basically the Spotlight basically searches for everything like you would on a laptop, web, etc. Kind of just gives you a great load of suggestions. Any questions on that then? That's kind of just the introduction to it. Good, because I know you're all itching to get on with the first piece of Kahoot. Has anyone not joined that needs to join? Certainly worth sticking yourself onto Kahoot because we're going to have a couple of questions. Paul, keep the questions coming. It's a real shame that we can't kind of give you a Mac environment and go and play with it for an hour or so. But unfortunately, Apple are very tight, so tight in their operating environment that you're not actually allowed to run it in a virtual machine because it's not licensed, so we couldn't do it. Okay, thumbs up if you're all ready. And we will kick off our Kahoot session. Good, right, let's start. Fastest fingers, remember, gets more points. Let's see whoever carry on with this. Your first question for Apple OS is true or false? Apple OS is open source. Oh, look at that number shoot up. How many people are ready for that? Fastest fingers? Let's see who cracked that one first. Let's see also how many people tried to jump at it really quickly and got the wrong one. So Apple is not open source. It is closed source. You're not allowed to modify the code, and that's what's meant by open source. The Linux software is open source. A lot of it is open source. That means you can make changes as you like. Let's see who takes the lead to start with. Looks like Sebas. Well done. Thank you very much. Cablan, Paolo up there. Right, let's see who gets the next one right. I can search for applications, websites, iTunes Store, and more in Oh, looks like everyone's been paying attention. Well done. Cracking stuff. Okay, that is the spotlight bar. Remember the little magnifying glass essentially? I put magnifying glass down there just in case anyone might fall for it. And car lights was just a comedy one I had to fit. But that is great. Well done, people. See how that changes the top. Hello, basically jumping up. Cablan. Gabino dropping up several. That's good. Let's see what's the next question then. Drop a pin. Place your pin on the launch pad. I don't think we've done a drop pin before. Sometimes people on their phones have troubles with this one. And I know lots of people are going to complain about, oh, it wasn't accurate, it dropped in the wrong place. But let's be honest, it's all a bit of fun, isn't it? Only a packet of virtual sweets we send you at the end. Marcus has let himself down by forgetting to hit submit. Oh, look at that. Great big cluster towards the right area. Yes, it is our beautiful little 4, 6, 9. The 9 boxes down the right-hand side is our launch pad. Let's see how that fixes it. Oh, I don't know where that went. Drop your pin on the spotlight search. Oh, a lot of you getting really close. Well done. That's good. It is the search button. There's our spotlight one up there. It's also noticed up here if I drag that on there. Wow, that's pretty good. Well done, people. Okay, so we're going to carry on then. Drop into our presentation again. So that kind of gives you a rough idea about the space you're working with. You know, we're familiar with the Windows and stuff and we'll talk about things, but let's drop into the Mac OS, the file system. Okay, Apple is famous. It writes its own file system. APFS is the Apple file system. Okay, it features strong encryption, good space sharing because we know we can have multiple users that basically log onto the same Mac. It has some good snapshot ability. So you can take snapshots of your file system, which is what APFS is all about. And it has fast directory sizing. That means you can get access to directories very quickly. So the file system used by macOS or 10.12 or earlier. You can also use MS-DOS FAT, so the good old FAT system, or exFAT. Snapshots are very much like backups. Yes, Paul, what a snapshot basically does, you know, when you normally do a backup, you will kind of go, I want to take these files and I want to stick them over there. What snapshot basically does is snapshot says, I'm just going to take, like taking a picture, I'm going to take a picture of my drive in that current state, bang, and that's it. And it's done very quickly with the APFS. Cool, that's good. So it also supports the FAT system. So I will say this again and again. Whenever you're transferring files between an Apple and a PC or a Linux, Unix system, whichever one you're doing, it's always best if you're sticking it on a Magic USB stick, if you're banging it onto one of these, or if you're sticking it on a portable drive, make sure that is formatted in a format that's acceptable by all of them. Now, we know the format is basically accepted by all of them. is basically FAT. So FAT is readable by all the operating systems that you are likely to install on your system. So how does it actually look when you open it up and kind of look at the folders? So the directories are very similar. It kind of lays it out in a slightly different manner. But you can see here we are looking at a hierarchical system, a bit like a tree, where we have the Macintosh hard disk, we have users, we then have admin, and it all branches out, very similar to the way that it does within Windows. So some of these, normally it's called Mac hard disk, Macintosh hard disk drive. You can rename it. You can change the name when you format it or when you create it. Okay, most Macs only tend to have one. We have an applications folder. Okay, strangely enough, this is where the computer stores all those particular programs that you have. We have library. This is where the applications save what they need. So it's their library files. This is where the configuration files and resources and fonts are stored. You do not need to do anything with this folder. Please don't dive in there and start ripping stuff out. Okay, this is what the applications use basically to run themselves. So don't go diving in there unless you really know what you're doing. And we have the system folder. Okay, this is where the Mac OS is basically stored. Again, please don't go modifying the Mac OS if you want your Apple to carry on running. And then we have our very friendly users. So every user that signs onto the Mac will get their own user folder. You can see I've got 3 users here. I've got admin. Well, I've got 1 user. I've got an admin user, and we'll talk about the public and shared in a second. So if I had another user in there called David, I'd have admin, David, public, shared. Unless you're, it says there at the bottom, unless you're an administrator, you won't get access to anyone else's folders. Okay, again, it's security, it's encrypted, it prevents people from stealing or overwriting bits and pieces for everyone. Let's have a chat about the public folder. If you use a Mac on a network and make it accessible across your network, this is essentially where you can share files. You can make them available to any other Mac user. So if you're in a building, in a company that uses Apple Macs, you can simply chuck stuff in your public folder and say, oh, it's available there. Okay, and people can get those details, a bit like a Dropbox or something like that. They can put stuff in and take stuff off. And there's shared. It was a bit like the public folder, except only people on your computer can access it. So the public one is other computers can gain access. The shared one is if I have another user on this, for example, David, Peter, John, anything I put into that shared folder can be shared by all those other people on this system. And then with our home folder, a lot of these folders we're pretty familiar with, aren't we? Things such as our desktop, our documents, our downloads. These are all very familiar items, aren't they? Desktop is basically what appears on our desktop. Documents is where we put our documents. We kind of get the idea, don't we? Downloads is where we download items. Very familiar with the Macintosh, or with the Windows environment, it's the same, as well as it is with the Linux environment as well. They use similar names and similar terminology. I don't know if it needs me to go over any of those in details, please do shout, but I think we will pretty much skip through those. One thing you will notice on that Apple did really well was when they were first introducing things like iTunes and the little iPods and things like that, they combined it all. A lot of the attraction for the Apple environment is the massive integration between devices that you have. They were the first really to instigate this. You know, I remember 20 years ago going down and seeing a friend in London. 20? I'm going to say 20 just so you don't think I'm really old. Probably a bit before that, going down to a friend in London, literally watching him basically go to his iPad and basically, well, it wasn't an iPad, go to his Mac and go, well, I'm just going to copy some iTunes stuff onto this system. And then strangely enough, it appeared straight away on the phone that he had and on his other device. Yes, because they're all integrated and they did that very well. Okay, and we haven't really done that on a PC environment. Well, we've done it now, haven't we? But previously, it was literally the Apple environment went, oh, you buy just Apple devices and we'll integrate everything together. Smash it all up. You can access those particular iTunes libraries on any one of your devices. Wow. We think that was amazing years ago. Now, well, we do it all the time, don't we? It's not that common anymore. Pictures and public. So just like this is an individual public folder that you can share yourself. So any questions about the file system? Cool, we're cracking through this, aren't we? Public and shared. Is that the same on Windows? I think Windows tends to use a slightly different terminology, but certainly in the Apple environment, yes, public and shared is what they're aiming for. I think Windows is kind of catching up a little bit. Now, can anyone tell me why it was so important for Apple to do public and shared folders on the individual systems? Certainly when they originated, why was it so important? There's a question for all you Apple users that are still on here. Oh, I can't see anyone typing in there. Let's see if we get anything. You've got no idea, you're allowed to type no idea in the live chat. There you go. Okay, well, I'll tell you. The reason it was so important was because the Apple themselves didn't have servers. They had no file servers. The concept of servers was really a Microsoft concept. Well, the concept was along the Microsoft end of things. Okay, they produced the servers. Apple environments kind of went, well, we don't want Windows stuff. We will simply do our shares ourselves. Okay, and they basically put the public shares and the private shares on the local Macs, rather than going, oh, we need a server to do that and a server to control all that environment for us. Apple did make an attempt to produce Apple servers about 25 years ago, I'm sure it was, but they tried basically getting into the server market. In the end, they pulled it. The devices were too expensive. No one wanted to buy it. And they weren't really integrating into what you would consider to be the business environment. They would have only really been relevant for the people that were using their individual Macs. These were small DTP companies that were doing high-end graphics stuff. And the high-end graphics guys kind of went, well, we don't want a server. We're just great doing it on our own little Mac. You cope with it. We do fine. So they found other solutions rather than basically going down the server line. Now, later on, we'll talk about how you can connect Apples to Windows servers and file shares. But we'll cover that in a bit. Bonus set of sweets for what that Mac is on the screen there. Oh, look at that. macOS in there. Nardi in there as well with a Mac Mini. That is a Mac Mini. It's actually the device I'm currently running on. Tiny little devices. And the reason they can build things like the Mac Minis is because they don't have to worry about so much upgradable ability. They don't have to worry about people putting a card in. Why would you put another network card in it? Well, if we wanted, Apple says if we wanted 2 network slots in it, we'd have built 2 network slots for you. We wouldn't want you to put another card in it. So they can build smaller devices like that. I think it probably is an i5, actually. It's probably a good call. So Apple IDs. Why do we have an Apple ID? So it allows us to access all the Apple services that we basically have. Okay, so it gets us linked onto our App Store, our Apple Music, our iCloud, our iMessage. And indeed, I'm dreading the fact that one of my kids is going to send a message to me on one of those devices, either on iMessage or FaceTime or something like that, and it's going to pop up during this presentation because it's automatically linked in. I've logged in here with my ID. I'm going to get the same notifications on my phone as I get on this Apple, and vice versa. So I've told them not to. Let's see how much attention they pay. But this is all linked in all together. So this is the Apple all together. It doesn't matter what platform you're running on. We will basically keep it all together for you. As out of curiosity, let's have a show of hands for how many people have an Apple ID. I can ask Rasha a question now. Rasha, how many people are actually on the call at the moment in this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
including us and stuff.
11. Yeah, just a big number would do. Guesstimate would be fine. So far, I can see 10 people with Apple IDs. Only 10? I seriously, I mean, my dad ended up with an Apple ID. Mind you, he ended up with a Google ID as well. He just creates IDs left, right, and center. It's unbelievable what he can do. And then he comes to me and goes, Dave, why is it not integrated? Why is it not working? I go, which ID are you using? Well, I don't know which ID I'm using. I had one a minute ago, but I forgot the password, so I created another one. So he's like that. Okay, so we got a fair few of us, and indeed, as soon as you touch an Apple device, it kind of goes, you've got to have an Apple ID, to use it. So for those of you that haven't done it, we'll quickly go through how you get an Apple ID. So you can basically create an Apple ID when you come to the system. You can go sign in. There's an option at the bottom for creating an Apple ID. You can do this on an iPad, an iPhone, a Mac. You can do it on Windows devices. So you don't actually have to have an Apple to have an Apple ID. You can get iTunes basically on your desktop, Windows PCs, as well as everything else. And potentially link it up with everything. I tend to put an awful lot of my music on iTunes. Great stuff. Okay, some of the applications, some of the tools that the Apple comes through with is at something called a time machine. Okay, they have a default backup system. This is really revolutionary. Years ago, Apple people were laughing at Windows people going, oh my God, I've got to run a backup. I've got to keep a backup on my system. And the Apple guys going, well, we just use time machine. It's just there. We click it, enable time machine. So the macOS basically has a default utility. It is not the only utility you can use. If you don't want to use time machine and you don't like it, sure, we can go and get another application that does your backups for you. Okay. Can back up to local storage devices if you wanted to. We used to plug in USB drives basically onto systems and take backups. Nowadays, a lot of time machines simply go up onto the cloud with your Apple accounts. And this is beautiful because it means if I drop my laptop in the bath, if I drop my laptop in the bath, for example, and it goes totally kaput, I get a new one and I just go plug it into the network, connect to the internet and go, right, restore from my time machine. And my time machine would have been taken last time my Apple was basically connected to the network. So all of a sudden it just dumps the whole lot onto my system. Takes about an hour depending on what you got. And then you've got exactly the same as you basically had when you dropped it into the bath. So we are no longer in that fear of going, oh, I've lost my world. No, it basically keeps the sequential backup. You have settings in terms of how many you keep and how often you take it. You can basically just go into the time machine settings and you can kind of set those things up. You can do it so that it does a backup now, or you can ask it to back up at particular times. Perfect, Paul. Great. Keep asking those questions. I know nothing about Macs. Paul, this is why we do this. This is why we do this. Now, for those of you that are panicking, don't those of you that are panicking, that's the wrong way to use it. When you do the CompT A+ exam, just like Linux, they kind of go, you need to know Linux exists and know a few things about Linux. It's pretty much the same with the Mac environment. CompT A concentrates an awful lot more on Windows than it does on the Mac environment. So although I'm going through loads of details here, memorizing it, probably not. You need to know the time machine exists for a backup routine. Don't need to know how to use it. You just need to know these things work. So as I've said, you can basically do a recovery and repair. Ronald's got feet in two camps there, haven't he? You use an iPhone and an iPad, but then you use the Windows for a desktop and a laptop. I'm pretty much the same. I mean, I have to use both for the work that I basically do. So I have stocks of both around that I tend to be playing with. So Apple basically has a recovery and repair. You know, we have fun with our Windows systems, and now we can use the recovery center to basically get the recovery done. macOS can come from a recovery from the built-in systems. Any Mac that you basically have coming back to you for if you're an IT guy comes back and says, oh, it's having problems, it's going faulty, it's all that sort of stuff. You can simply restart it, and you can either restore it from a time machine or you can blow it away. You can simply blow it away, reinstall the latest OS on the system, up you come, quick recovery, and all of a sudden you're back up and running, looking to either recover from a time machine onto that, or simply to go, let's create a brand new user on that. So it is very simple, and they make it nice and easy for you. Now, when you boot a system into recovery mode, you can do several things. You can restore from a time machine, which allows you simply to take the old one and stick it onto it. You can install a new Mac OS that allows you to reinstall it. You can run Safari. That allows you basically just to do a little bit of Safari surfing on the internet while you're still working at a recovery mode. You can go into disk utilities that it offers you, and the utilities allow you to either repair or erase your disk, so you can start again. You can flatten the system from that point, or you can attempt to recover it if you think there might still be stuff there. And you can start any security utilities. Okay, there's some good utilities on the Mac that basically allow you to run some security stuff. So you can start some of these utilities. They can be used to run diagnostics on the system to basically check how the system is behaving. So you can do some hardware diagnostics on it in the recovery and repair mode. You can also pick up a startup disk if you had a operating system that you wanted to basically put in there. This is what I had to do when I installed Mint onto the system. You put it into recovery mode. I then put a Mint boot up disk, essentially a USB stick into it, and said, yep, can you boot from that? And it boots off of Mint. I tell Mint then to blow the disk away and install itself onto that Mac OS, that Mac hardware. And you can even run the terminal. So you can run the terminal up and you can do command line structures from that particular terminal. So that tends to cover the recovery. Has anyone got any questions about the recovery and repair system? I can see Gabitsu basically being I'm an Android person and I make huge mistakes by buying an iPhone. Marcos, well, switch from iOS to Android. There is, it's not like saying it's Marmite, but it can be like that. If you run a Mac system, a full Mac environment, because it's so integrated, it's quite nice and you feel really at home with it because all the commands and all the bits on your different Apple devices and all the applications are pretty much all the same. So it's very comfortable. You run on a Windows environment, you're running Android, okay, that's a different OS compared to the Windows OS. Whereas if you're running a Mac environment, well, the OSs are very, very similar, and what you do on those are pretty samey sort of thing. So they do tend to feel much more comfortable. So you do get people who sit on the Macs and go, I'm only ever going to use Macs throughout my entire life. Great, that's fine. Pay the extra money and use the Macs, that's cool. And you get some people who use Windows and mix it with a Mac environment, and they can sometimes get a bit confused when they're switching over. It's like me running this presentation today. I've moved from a Windows presentation environment onto a Mac presentation environment, and you're going to see me have a few few little drag and drop errors and things like that as we move around, but it should be pretty good. But, I do use the Windows environment for the majority of stuff because I have to deal with businesses that obviously use the Windows environment themselves. Never say never. Yes, exactly. Ronald, is there a time machine on iPhone and iPad? The iPhones and iPads, certainly the iPhones are automatically backed up to your iClouds, aren't they? Which is essentially the equivalent of your time machines. Does that answer that one for you, Ronald? Cool. Okay, well, we have whipped through that first session. I'm very happy with the speed we're going at the moment. macOS, I mostly use my MacBook back in the day for music and stuff. Yeah. And I send emails and browsing. So certainly there are horses for courses, and people use them for different things. I know a lot of the time people ended up buying iPads simply for games, giving them to their kids, reading tablets and things like that. So that was one thing that brought them, a big chunk of the market to start with. And then other people got involved producing other tablets, didn't they? Okay, well, as I say, really happy with the speed we're going to. We are rushing through it. Thank you very much. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break at this stage. We're going to listen to some more tunes. And then we're basically going to crack through the rest. We're going to talk about Mac applications and what applications and how we install them after this break. Did you see me looking there for the stop share button? Found it in the end. I got there. Welcome back, everyone. Hi, you managed to have a quick comfort break or get an apple or a pancake in. And we are ready to kick off with the next half of our lectures. There's a question there from, let's have a look. Let's see. Does the new iMac machine also require parts registration verification? As the new iPhone, we say registration. Most of the Apple devices, when you basically log on to them or when you turn them on, will pop up and say, what's your Apple ID? And it'll be as simple as that because they are used to hooking everything in. You do have the option to skip that piece and not use an Apple ID, but you log on essentially as you do with the Windows machine as an individual user. But then if you want to go to the App Store and get anything from the App Store, it says, oh, I don't know who you are. You need to tell me your Apple ID. You need that hook into the Apple ID. Does that answer that question for you? That's if you're back from getting your coffee. Dived in there. Luca, that's pretty. I mean, you can use it. You can use the device. You can carry on doing bits and pieces. You can install applications that aren't from the App Store. We will talk about that in a minute. But yes, you tend to be not restricted. It's kind of like you're missing out. Apple throws all this stuff, says, give us your Apple ID, log on to us, and we're going to give you all this backup stuff. We're going to give you access to the cloud. We're going to throw everything up for you. We're going to make your life so much easier. So it's kind of like, well, if you buy it, it's like buying a car and not filling it up with petrol, so you can't drive it anyway. Oh, magic. I haven't seen that for the new iPhones now. If you want to replace a screen, for example, that screen needs to be registered or replaced by an official Apple service. Will not work. I'll have to look into that because I do a couple of screen replacements for friends at points. God, I look forward to that then. That's Apple again. Remember about Apple basically controlling a lot of their own hardware and making sure you are running on their hardware rather than someone else's. That's probably based around that end of things. I wouldn't have thought they would prevent. I thought they'd be preventing people from installing new screens. They just want them to install Apple screens, and I think that's probably where it comes around. Good. So let's have a quick thumbs up then. Who can see the macOS applications that we're going to talk to next? Beautiful, Marcos. Fastest fingers first there. Well done. Yeah, Precious, Luca, Ronald, Sebastian, Kablan, Peter, Joaquin, Seth. Perfect. Okay. So let's on with the story then. So we said basically that Apple basically runs off Apple IDs. Yes, they do like to know who you are, so you can basically get onto the App Store. So you can get all the beautiful free apps. There's a lot of free apps up there, as well as getting access to the cloud and other things like that. So we know that is a nice way to do things. So there's sort of three ways you can get onto the App Store. Yes, we can use our beautiful Spotlight. Yay, Spotlight. We can get there straight away by clicking App Store and off we go. You can use the Launchpad and basically pick it up from the Launchpad. Or you can click on the Apple icon at the top and then basically drop on there where the App Store is. Okay, so they make it really easy for you basically to get down to it. So what sort of applications are we likely to get off the App Store? Tell you what, let's have a little quiz then. In the live chat, not quiz, let's have a questions. In the live chat, can you type in your favorite app from the App Store? This is probably for Apple users. I know we said a few of us have iPhones and things like that. Your favorite app from the App Store. And tell you what, just to keep the Android people in, if you're on an Android device, your favorite app from the Android, was it Google Store? And please put a little note whether or not it's an App Store or a Google one, an Android device. Marcus is Instagram, well done. Kaplan is Find My, yeah, very useful. Most use WhatsApp, yeah. Kaplan is Carl Knight. I've not heard of that one, Kaplan. That sounds good. Ronald uses the wallet. Yep, I use wallet. Marty basically uses wallet there again. Sebastian, reminders. Congecko, wallet. And I think if you look at the variety and the different applications you can get up there, where no one said Angry Birds or anything like that, probably one I would have expected to come up. Or is it dead and gone now? Angry Birds is probably dead and gone, isn't it? Google Games. Okay, and I think it just kind of shows that the App Store itself, yeah, has hundreds and hundreds of different applications. You know, a while ago there was a beautiful phrase that went around the Apple environment. You know, if you wanted to do anything on your iPhone, there'd be an app for that. You know, it was as simple as that. I want to do this, there's an app for that. Go to the App Store. Okay, so when you basically open the Mac Store, you basically see the main discovery page. Type in the searches for what you want in there. You know, we use Jira, we use GitHub, we use Slack, we use Google Apps, we use Microsoft MS365 is available on these sort of things. Ledger Live, are you an accountant, are you, Luca? Or is it just for a personal business type things? Okay, so it's a great place to go. So when you basically find it, you can basically search for it, you can install it, yeah, and you get prompted for your Apple ID and password. You probably need to provide a credit card details for the App Store to make sure that you are able to pay for the devices that then ask you to pay for. Well, there's so many free items in there, it's unbelievable. So to uninstall an application, well, pretty simple. Apple makes applications really easy. You go into the Launchpad, you drag it into the bin. Well, that's it. That's your uninstall process. Okay, so much easier than Windows. You can hold the mouse down and you click X and that can give you the little wobbly things or basically to move it. Again, you can do that. It's very similar to the iPhone that you basically experience. Years ago, before Apple kind of put a few locks on their devices and things like that, application installation and uninstallation and transferring and copying was so easy on the Apple environment that there were people actually putting applications onto USB sticks They were walking into app stores, plugging it into the demo devices, and simply dragging their applications onto the demo devices. Drag, drop, that's now installed. Thanks for your time. And it was happening the other way around. If they had particular demo installations that were doing particular things, yeah, you could walk in with a USB stick, plug it in the side, you could drag their demo applications onto a USB stick and walk out the door with it. That was how simple installations and uninstallation and stuff happens on the Apple environment. So we can do it very simply from the App Store, but we are not restricted. The benefit of the App Store is really that Apple controls it. So every application that gets added to the App Store goes through an Apple verification process. So Apple will take that code, they will run the code, they will hammer it, they will test it, and then they will rubber stamp it and go, yeah, you've met all the requirements. It's not going to make our system crash or make us look silly. Your application can go onto the App Store. So 90% of applications produced for the Apple will go through that process. But it's not the only way. Okay, you can do a direct install. And these tend to come as DMG files, and they can produce, and you can get these off the internet. So if you're searching the internet and you don't want to download something off of the App Store because you want to do it in a different manner, or that person hasn't published it, then you can download the DMG file. I think that's Affinity Designer 2.0 DMG, which is just dropped into the download folders. If I want to install that, I'm very simply double click on the DMG file, and then we can drag and drop it into my applications folder. That's your install. Wow, it's not tricky. Bit easier than on the Windows environment, do you think? Or not? Definitely, I think it's probably quite easy, isn't it? Once you launch it, if it isn't from the App Store, when you double click on it to launch it, Apple will now pop up a little message going, oh, this one hasn't been verified by us. Are you sure you want to do it? Okay, so it's a good check in there. Make sure that when you do the direct install ones, these are the ones that you actually want to run. This is me installing GIMP 2.10 for an application download. GIMP's a drawing package. I'm not going straight to hell for installing that or anything like that. It's a drawing package that's a photo imaging processing toy. Really nice, actually. Free. It's free. But like Adobe Acrobat, but free. Okay, so some will ask for extra permissions. So that's simply how you get to install devices. Install applications on the system. Cool, well, buckle up then. We've got another 2 questions on our Kahoot for you. Ready? True or false? Jump straight into that one. Use your Apple ID to access applications. So it's a true or false. Do you use your Apple ID, to access applications from the App Store? Oh, look at that. Very true. Fantastic. I won't linger on that one as we all got that one right. See how that adjusts the score. Sebastian's still at the top. Mardi basically jumping up big time. Paul B up there. Pablo as well. Palo rather. Really good. I think we've got another 2 on this particular session. True or false? The App Store is the only place I can get applications from for my Mac. Sorry, Gabitsu, to hear that your internet's not working. Sure, you'll be able to catch up with bits. Oh, split that. Was that everyone trying to get that really fast? Okay, the App Store is where you're recommended to get them, but it's not the only place you can basically get applications from. Remember, we can go to the internet, we can download a DMG file. Application comes in DMG file formats, and then we can simply install that DMG file. So we do not need to go to the App Store. Let's see how that changed things. Paul B jumping up. 6 people have reached an answer streak of 4. Oh, this is impressive. Doing really well. Okay, and the last one for this particular session, well, this particular Kahoot session, to uninstall an application, I should. The others I kind of threw in, they're not quite right. Apple, anyone who runs a Mac should automatically know they do not have something called a right click. Okay, and we'll talk about that later on in the course. That's a thrown in from the Windows environment. We don't run an uninstall program. Why would we do that? We just drag it to the bin. Off you go. We don't select it and press the del key. Good, let's see how that affected things. But well done for loads of people getting that right. Seabass still at the top. Good work. Any questions about applications before we move on to the next part of our presentation? So I'd love to be able to help you with the internet in Germany. Sorry. Obviously, you'll be able to watch the videos and you can basically do the catch up on that piece, but you won't be able to take part in Kahoot if you've dropped off of that. I know it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Okay, so we're probably going to fly through some of this. This is all about the Mac OS system settings. Okay, it has a nice central location. We've basically seen it is in traditional cog format. We know we can get it off of loads of windows. We know we can access it from the bar at the bottom to get to our system settings. And we know we can configure lots of different things in it. So we can configure our Wi-Fi, our Bluetooth. We can control how our Mac looks. We can change our click preferences and the speed of our mouse. Accessibility, such as the screen sizes, viewability. And we can control our Apple IDs in there. So that's really where we need to go. So that's the main thing you really need to remember from this particular system settings is that system settings on a Mac is where you go there to change all these particular items. And that's what you need to know for the CompTIA A+ exam. So we won't go into a massive details of that, but that's literally where it all is. And I think I'll show you, it's quickly laid out. It's probably laid out pretty similar to things that we're used to. So appearances, we can control dark, light, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Apple Family IDs. Oh, it's my lovely daughter and son. So this is where we tend to control things. Appearances, accessibilities. You know, do we have a zoom on it? Do we have a voiceover? Siri, Spotlight, control centers. And again, quit. Remember that menu is always at the top right-hand side, isn't it? Any questions about system settings? Which version of this? Of the Mac OS? I'm probably running an earlier version. I was tempted to basically update it. This is Simona. Oh, for those people, Apple loves giving their OS's names. I've gone through so many different names. This is Mac OS Sonoma. This is 14.6.1, so I'm well out of date. I think we're about 15 something nowadays, aren't we? When I came in here earlier today, I thought, shall I update the operating system? And then I thought, if I do, something's going to go wrong. And I thought, it's odds law for one of a better idea, so I didn't bother updating it. I know it's a bit old. Sorry about that. No, you're still on Catalina. Catalina, wasn't it? 10.15. Get it updated. It's free, isn't it? That's one thing with the Mac environment. When you buy the hardware, you buy the physical Mac hardware, and then Apple goes, you can have as many updates as you like. We're just going to keep updating the operating system. Totally free for you. We want you to keep updating it. The only thing that does happen is, of course, when your system becomes so old, 10 years old or whatever it is, it will no longer take the new operating system. So you get that little warning, sorry, I can't update you anymore to the new operating system. So that's really what happens. And again, that's, as I explained before, that's why I ended up putting Mint onto my iMac, because I know Mint would work with anything. We kind of covered that. Anyone got any questions about the versioning that's basically used on the Macs for their operating system? I know Marcos kind of brought it up there. Give me a thumbs up if you're kind of all right with that sort of thing. Oh, perhaps I should show you. I'll show you when we're at the end. So if it crashes, I won't feel too bad. I'm sure they don't. Yeah, I like that idea. But I'm sure they don't intentionally slow down your system. Basically, your device becomes, because when you produce new software, your software is faster. It's better. It uses more memory. It needs more processing power because it's doing lots more busy things. That's why it gets slower. They don't kind of deliberately go, let's make it slower for the old systems. Bit of a conspiracy theory there. Okay, so let's have a little chat about the terminal on the Mac. Okay, well, hold on. Terminal on the Mac, does that look at all familiar for anyone? Who thinks they've seen something similar to that recently? I'm dropping a few hints here. Linux. Thank you, Precious. Spot on. Yeah. Linux. It is taken from Linux. That's exactly what it is. It's a Linux-looking terminal. The command structures are done very similar to Linux. So the terminal basically pops up. It says computer name and user. You can change that if you want to, but it looks very similar to Linux. The commands you use come in the same type of format as Linux and indeed some of the Windows. This command structure is a common thing across the board, where you have a particular command name, you have any particular options you want to put onto it, okay, and then you have any arguments that you basically have. Hello, is that why though? Why is it very familiar or very similar to Linux? Because the Mac operating system is based on Linux. It's as simple as that. The boys at Apple literally went, we need an operating system. We're going to steal Linux. Well, not steal Linux because it was all freeware. And they're simply going to use a Linux operating system. They're going to call it Apple OS. Just like someone went, we're going to have Red Hat. And we're going to call it Red Hat, which is based on a Linux operating system, but was obviously done a lot later. And Apple simply said, we're going to take that. We're going to make it our own. No one can modify it. And they've then basically proprietarized it and made it non-shareware. Perfect. Okay, so some simple commands. We spoke about ls, didn't we? Well, there it is on the Mac getting used. ls as a listing the files in there. So I'll simply list those commands. ls-l. Well, we use exactly the same argument in Linux, don't we? ls-l lists all our files with some details, doesn't it? Essentially, L is for the long case. Basically means it basically expands all the details about that particular file, where the original one just gives you sample1.txt, sample2.txt. This one basically gives you all the details about that particular file. Luca, I like the cynicism there, Luca. They took it and made an expensive toy for Starbucks people. Oh, Chris has dropped a meeting. Okay. Some people are having some bits of flaky time with the internet connection, but as I say, you can listen to the videos later, can you? Okay, here we've basically got an example of those commands. We've added an argument. So we've got a -l to give us a list, and we've told it which folder we basically want to work with. Now you can see there the folder structure is exactly like Linux. We are not using a C:\/ user /admin /documents. We are simply using user /admin /documents. Okay, so you can see it is exactly the same as a Linux operating system. You can see here the option is the -L and the argument is exactly what we basically passed here. It is exactly the same command. Now, when I say exactly the same command, it's true to say that whenever you deal with a Linux stroke Mac operating system environment in the command line, there's about 90% of commands are the same. But it kind of drifts because, of course, people have modified it. When they take their own version, they make it special, modify it their own particular way. So there will be commands that will be totally different on the Mac OS, as you will find in something like Linux, like Mint or dban or Red Hat, because that's what the person who basically made those modifications has changed those particular commands to do different things, to perform special things, and they will have extra or less commands depending on what was required. Now, just to scare you totally, there are more than 2,000 terminal commands. Okay, but there is a manual. Okay, I think you can use man space ls or man space and that particular command, and it will give you the manual. And we showed you that in Linux, where it basically lists out what that command basically would do and all the arguments. So it shows you things such as this. It shows you the name synopsis, which basically shows you some breakdown of what we've already learned. So you can see the command in many different options. So it gives you an idea of it, and then it gives you a description for all the different switches and everything like that in there. Any questions about terminal commands then on the Mac OS? Well, no, you're exactly right. The Mac OS is basically a flavor of Linux. Don't tell Apple that though, because they'll be very upset. Good, I can't see anyone typing, so we're going to pop on to the next slide then. Mounting drives. Wow, remember we did this in Linux, didn't we? And it was a little bit ugly depending on the version of Linux you were running. Some people had to do it from the terminal, but you can basically do it from the GUI. Okay, Apple basically loves you doing it from the GUI. Apple think GUI all the way if you can. This is what makes it so popular. So we can basically add things, mounting drives, just by coming in and basically asking it to mount drives. It does it automatically on a lot of them. If I was to slide a USB stick in here, it would go pop up and it'd go, oh, by the way, you've just plugged something in and it'll pop up as a new drive. Great. Now, when we want to connect to network servers, we can basically do it through this. So we can connect to a network server. So we can access connect to server, Command K, or we can do it from the Finder and select connect server. We need to give it an address. Now, Apple will normally prefer you to use a server IP address, but you can use real names. Okay, and they call it an SMB. So SMB colon / / 192.168.50.10 is my server's IP address. /share1 is my share name. So we could replace the IP address there with the actual real server name if I called it file server. So we could replace that IP address with file server / share1. And that allows us to connect through to it. Does that sound sensible for everyone? Good. Now, when you're mounting in a work environment, remember in a work environment, you have security processes, don't we? So remember we have groups. The SMB is more than likely to be a Windows file server. So when we're logging onto it, we need to tell it the details of who we're logging on as. No, it's not in there, but it's somewhere else. So we need to tell it who we're logging on as. So we need to give it the Windows authentication. So although I may log on to my Mac with my Apple ID, Windows doesn't know about my Apple ID. It sits there and goes, nothing to do with us. That's an Apple ID. The Windows will sit there and go, you've got to give me something that is from my Active Directory users and computers, something that I understand and can authenticate to. So all Mac users will tend to have an Apple ID, and then if they're using it in a business environment, they will have their Windows logon credentials. Now, I use Windows very crudely there because you can basically use a alternative that is in there that we'll basically be talking about in a second. And you can basically ask it to automatically log on or not automatically log on. So it becomes perpetual or not perpetual. So there is a product. It's not a product. It's wrong to say it's a product. LDAP, which is our lightweight directory. Version 3 now is a directory service. It's not an application because it is called a protocol. So LDAP is a service that provides a protocol service that converts normal logon stuff into Windows logon pieces. So we don't have to go, we're referring to an Active Directory service because we can run it through an LDAP service. Okay, Red Hat has LDAP, which can basically you can basically put your Red Hat systems and a lot of your Linux systems onto Active Directory users and computers. So they can basically all function as one. So you can manage all your security through the Microsoft Active Directories services for your Mac environment as well as your Linux environment. Does everyone understand that? Give me a thumbs up if you understand that you can basically control all the security for access for network drives for all your different OSs. LDAP stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Remember, it is not an application, it is a protocol. So it's just essentially the way of talking to things. Perfect. Good few thumbs up there. That's what I like to see. If you do have a question, now's the time to speak. You can happily poke it into there. Remember, there's no such thing as a silly question. Cool. But as with every good old-fashioned Linux system, we can basically do it from the terminal. Okay, it's not that attractive from the terminal. There's the equivalent protocol in there. You can go to the disk utilities. Remember, we talked about creating a share that basically we then mount that particular share. Exactly the same as you would do with Linux. So you can see in there that we're basically talking to dev disk 0, which is an internal disk, dev disk 1, which is synthesized, dev disk 2, which is another physical disk, and we will mount those particular drives. You can see there we're using a disk utilities, mount disk, dev disk. And it says mount successfully, and then we basically have a new disk. Any questions before we dive into Kahoot? I know mounting disk is probably one of the more confusing things. I think the important thing to remember is when you are running a Mac operating system or a Linux operating system, if you don't want to do it by the command line, there's GUI options. So you do have menu options to go, I want to mount this disk and make it available. And that's always available. Good stuff. I can see you're all itching to get on with the Kahoot. Now let's see. So CBAS is basically the top. Let's see if we can draw level with him. I think we've got two further questions. Many of the commands in the terminal are the same as Linux, true or false? It is true. They are much the same in terms of their command structures. Let's see how it affects that leaderboard. See, that's still at the top there, stretching away a little bit, but definitely catchable. That's for sure. Precious, good to see you in that board as well. Gambino, let's see if we can get right to the top then. Up 4 places, Seth is the highest climber. In a scale 1 to 5, on my Apple, I would prefer to use terminal to mount a drive. So would you prefer to mount a drive with a command line or via a GUI, a graphical user interface? Ooh. Let's say the answer and see what you'll think. Ah, fair few of you wanting to use a terminal to mount drives. Very interesting. I don't think we give any points for that one. Last one, to monitor my CPU activity, I would use the activity monitor. I think we'll chat a little bit about that in a minute. Okay, thank you for taking part in the Kahoot quiz. So, how many people have heard of Magic Mouse? Magic Mice and trackpads. If you've owned a Mac, you would have touched them. Anyone who sits on a PC that wandered around, anyone who's using one of these at a Mac, would, in my opinion, would be stunned with amazement. Okay. So, on a PC, we have a regular mouse. Okay, it's got 2 buttons and a rolly wheel. Well, Mac doesn't like buttons. They don't like rolly wheels. Why would they do things like that? That's crazy. They have a touch-sensitive mouse. So what does that actually mean? That means instead of using a rolly wheel, I just move my finger up and down the mouse. So a bit like using your iPhone, it's touch sensitive. You move your finger up and down the mouse, on it scrolls. Okay, if I want to do something like a smart zoom, I can double click, double tap, and it smart zooms. To go to mission control, I can double tap 2 fingers. So literally, I'm just going, boop, boop, and my mission control opens. Well, try doing that on one of these things. Just doesn't work, does it? Okay, so this is what they do. They basically have some beautiful options on there. I'm just covering a few of them here. Swipe between full screen actions. 2 fingers just across your mouse. You're not moving the mouse at all. You're just doing that. Man, I was amazed when I first sat down. I sat next to a guy just recently employed me. I probably shouldn't have looked so gormless when he did it. It just employed me. Literally sat next to the CTO, and he loves his Macs. He's been on his Macs all his life. Sat there with a Magic Mouse, and he was flicking through screens like this, and he was doing this, and I'm going. I looked at it and just went, I've never seen one of those before. What's happening there? He's going, oh, yeah. Regular stuff on Macs. Swiping between pages is a single finger swipe. Beautiful. It looks complicated. I guess it's like riding a bike or something like that, driving a car. As soon as you get used to the actions, same as you do with your iPhone, as soon as you get used to the actions, wow, it's really easy. So that's the Magic Mouse, which is the one that literally looks as it says, and it looks like a proper mouse. You can run around and things like that. But why would they use that much space? So they have what's known as a trackpad. Well, trackpad's very similar like you have on a laptop. You kind of have a square, but they did it separately and they did it a lot better. Scrolling, two-finger slides. Pinching to zoom. So literally you're doing that and you're doing that on a static trackpad to zoom in and out. They are so nice. Marcus, I get excited about it, Marcus. I'm glad you're basically enjoying it as well. Dragging content, three fingers. We are using three fingers on a trackpad. Dragging content, use three fingers. Wow, getting to your launch pad. Three fingers, a bit of a pinch like that. Bang, your launch pad's up. You know what you're doing. And I've only covered some of them. There are so many, it's unbelievable. So if you do get to use one, try and get familiar with it. Don't just go, it's a pain. Get familiar with it and you will absolutely love it when you get the opportunity. Any questions about magic mice and trackpads? One thing I will say is, unfortunately, I'm using one of these. The reason I'm using one of these is because I think the magic mice are about 150 quid. Okay, I can pick up one of these for a fiver. Okay, magic mice are quite pricey. So I mean, I say they are lovely, but they are fairly pricey. Okay, so let's have a look at a couple of other Mac utilities and as we bring towards a close of this session. So there are a lot of other utilities in there, just like you would see on the PC. Okay, there's an activity monitor, and indeed that was the quiz we kind of had in Kahoot. So your activity monitor allows you to jump in and allows you to see exactly what's going on your machine. You know, we have an equivalent on Windows, don't we? So we have a task manager on Windows and things, whereas the activity monitor here does exactly the same. Lets you know your CPU percentage, the time that's basically taken the threads. Okay, and that's just on the CPU monitoring. Okay, you can see here we can also monitor the memory. We can monitor the energy, the disk usage, and the network speed. That's all basically done from the activity monitor. As I say, we don't go into any details for CompTIA. It's just important you know that it's there, and that's where you go to access these things. There is a console. This is the app that logs all the things that happen on your computer. So it's your logging system. So if you're having crashes and other things, you can check in your console, and your console will tell you what is going on. Okay, if you know your system crashed at 4:30, you can come and look at the console. You can look at what happened at 4:30, and it should tell you what is going wrong. Apples never crash anyway. What am I talking about? They're beautiful toys. They do crash. And that's where you go to, console utilities. Disk utilities. Yeah, it's just like on the PC, we need to be able to control our disks. So we have a disk utility, and this lets us see what we're using, what's got mounted, how much other stuff is basically getting used in there. Okay. It can be useful for troubleshooting issues or even erasing them entirely, but kind of be careful because it will let you wipe things out totally. One thing I'll say that Apple basically got totally right was they put SSDs into their machines really soon. They put it in a lot earlier than any of the other manufacturers. This gave them better battery life, faster boot up speeds, faster access. It's absolutely beautiful, but they cost a little bit more. A couple of other things they have a font book. Macs were really used by DTP people. These are people in publishing and things like that. So they were producing high-end magazines and other items like that. So the fonts and the control over the fonts were so important to Macs. They basically produced something called a font book. And you can go to the font book and you can add fonts, remove fonts. You can pay for people to create you fonts, and you can then drag and drop them into the font book to get them added to your utilities. Really good the way they manage that. And we have a keychain access. So this is the built-in password manager for your Mac. It stores your passwords in secure certificates. Okay, and the idea is this allows you to keep everything really safe and really secure, well away from anyone who might basically want to get to those. And the beautiful part of the fun with the keychain is it's not just available on one of your devices, it's available on all your devices. Again, this is Mac integrating multiple devices with single accesses. So any keychain I put onto my iPhone, I can basically access off of my Mac. If I log on to another Mac, well, my keychain can come straight across from the cloud and basically be used on that. So it does basically give you much more flexibility and security for your passwords. Now, remember I talked about when you drop things in the toilet or in the bath in my case, wasn't it? There's a migration assistant as well that allows you to cope with upgrades. So if you purchase a new Apple, you kind of sit them in the same room, you put them next to each other, and you go, actually, I want to migrate from one to the new one. So you go to the migration assistant, you give it the details, and click the button, and it goes, right, I'm just going to copy that lot across for you. Okay, so you get essentially the clone on a newer, faster system because it's not so much application or not so much OS dependent, simply drops it across for you. Doesn't work from Windows for Mac. I don't believe, or does it do from a Windows PC? Might be careful about it. I'm going to say yes, but I would have to test it. I haven't played with it, to be honest with you. Most people go Mac, 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 and do it that sort of direction. Any other questions about the migration assistant? Perfect. And we have our system information. Just as we do on our PC, we're able to check on the hardware that we've currently got installed. Okay, so it does categorize all our hardware and software on the machine. So we can look at what we've got, different versions, different makes, well, not different makes, obviously, different hardware UUIDs on the system. So it tells us all the details about our hardware on our system. Great stuff. Oh, okay. So Kahoot, this looks like it's going to be the last piece of our Kahoot for today. So let's have a final rush up, shall we, for people? Let's see who's in the lead and who's doing where. Paul B leaping to the top there. Seabass, see if you can get that back. Mardy, Precious, Gabino, let's see. Combo breakers, 5 participants just dropped their answer streak. Hard luck, people. True or false? The console utility logs all the things that happen. A lot of quick answers coming in there. That's what I need. Faster the answer, the more points you get. True. So the console is basically used to log all the details of what's happened on the system. And off. Let's see how that leaves us. Final question, 12 of 12. I've now seen the Apple iOS and I want one. Rate it 1 to 5. Let's see what you all think about the Apple OS now I've shown it to you. Ah, 36% of you want an Apple OS now you've seen it. Fairly split evenly, though, isn't it? Well, let's see who wins the Kahoot on Apple OS then. Marty, beautiful. 3rd place, that was good. Seabass up there. Who's the top dog? Paul B. You came from behind, I believe, Paul, didn't you? Well done. Good pat on the back. Virtual Suites on the way. Precious in there as well. Good to see a lot of you coming in there. Great participation, people. It's really fun doing these. I just hope you appreciate it as much as I do. So a sort of a roundup and a conclusion that we've got. So we kind of looked at, where the Apple OS basically started from, didn't we? We looked at its Linux and Unix basically background is where it all comes from. We looked at the file system, the Apple file system, APFS, and we looked at the GUI, the graphical user interface. So we did have a play with, some of the bits and pieces on the graphical user interface and what we basically have. And we looked at installing applications. So we looked at how easy it was, simply drag and drop and you install an applications. And we looked at some of the utilities, some of the backup procedures that we have on there that's automatic, where it stores all its log files, so basically how to get to those, how to change the colors and things on the systems. And we had a little bit of Apple magic with the Magic Mouse and the tracking pad. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? So we're kind of well, we're 15 minutes. That's not too early. This is really good. I love doing the Apple stuff because it's good chat around everything. So if we've got any questions from anyone, we can see a few examples. You can obviously play with things. I try not try not to reveal things I shouldn't reveal. It's probably why I tend to do in this. Kind of end up showing people half my operating systems. Okay, but you can see one thing I always point out to people is that the menu for this, doesn't matter where I move this, the menu is still always up the top for Chrome. Always at the top for Chrome, whereas our window normally would follow. On our Windows PC, we'd have a menu at the top here. Marcos has a question. I like questions. Well, that's our full screen title. Oh, click the wrong button. Lost the whole lot. It's great. Here's a question. What have we got then? Binary input output systems are used pre-operating system. So Apple has its own sort of integrity piece that it basically does. It does go through a post of pre-operating system test, just like all the Linux systems do, just like all the Windows operating systems do. Does that help? So it's similar, but it's Mac proprietary because it's their own hardware. So they write their own BIOS. Sorry, I should never do that. Went out with the 80s, didn't it? They write their own BIOS system that basically deals with their input output. Oh, Maddie basically asked an interesting question. MacBook laptops work fast for how many years before slowing down? As I said, the hardware itself doesn't slow down. What we do is we put too much other bits and pieces, and the operating system becomes a little bit too demanding on it. How many years do you think you get out of a brand new Mac, a brand new laptop? Probably say if you're not using it in the business environment, 5 years without any problems. But again, you probably get the same out of a PC one. But I think the Apple ones tend to last better because it's their own proprietary hardware. So the hardware tends to be a bit better quality, dare I say it. And the operating system updates are nice. To say that, I have a business guy that is currently running on a MacBook Pro that is, yes, it's just under 8 years old. And he's just coming to me now saying it's a little bit slow, Dave. Can I get him a bigger, beefier one? So he's managed that for 8 years. Magelch basically there. Yeah, I mean, it's not UEFI because it's basically Mac proprietary stuff. So we probably need to think of it a bit less like a BIOS or UEFI, and it's basically just a Apple form of post systems. Marcos, my MacBook Pro is mid 2012, 13.3 inches with i7. Yeah, nice. 8 gigs of RAM. That's where you're going to horribly struggle. And I use both slots. If I upgrade to 16, would it be a problem to the laptop? If it was me, I'd definitely be looking at putting 16. If and I'm only being hesitant and putting a little bit of a caveat on this. Uh, Apple have a horrible habit, and you may well have opened yours up already. Apple have a horrible habit of soldering in the memory. Okay, I've got a right, there you go. So I've got one, a beautiful, it says 40 on the side of it. I've got a beautiful MacBook Air here that was purchased with 8 gigs of RAM. Okay, they soldered 8 gigs of RAM in. I cannot upgrade it. That's it. It's game over. Okay. But there again, sometimes they do produce the most of the models, some of the models, like MacBook Pros, particularly, where they will give you the option to upgrade the memory. But you need to make sure you check the serial number, the model number, Apple site, double check that you can upgrade before you spend the money and buy the things. And this is really the reason I say check the model and the serial number is I went through a case where we purchased 25 MacBook Pros, 25 MacBook Pros from Apple, all roughly around the same 3 to 6 month period. Somewhere in that 3 to 6 month period, Apple decided to start soldering the memory in. I had half that I could upgrade, very easy, and the other half were totally soldered in. There was no notification on it when we purchased it. And it was only when I went to upgrade them that we then found out Apple had decided to solder it in. So go careful with that, macOS. Basically, check it out first. Seth, I need help resizing drives on Kali Linux because I don't have enough space to do updates. Kali Linux should allow you to add and change the size of the disk drives as long as you have enough physical space. If it's a case that you've built one partition that is too small and that's where your operating system is running, then you should be able to change that size. I can't give you a hand, obviously, on this because we're talking about apples today, not pears. Sorry, dad joke 101. Ronell, today's topic makes me want to buy a Mac. Yeah, I just don't know where to get the money. There's plenty of banks you could rob, buy a mask. Yes, Apples are more expensive, but they're more expensive for a particular reason. Yes, the hardware is better than the stuff you will get in your HPs, in your Toshibas, certainly in your Lenovo's. Okay, the hardware is better. It's more reliable because they test their operating system with their hardware. They put decent SSDs into the systems. They do a lot of expensive stuff, but that means it costs more money. Okay, but it's that. Do you want to pay them more money or do you want to basically just run a Windows environment slightly cheaper? Mark, I'm still talking about upgrading. It's good to send email now. Processors are incredible from Apple. The processor chip was great. When they started making their own, they did the M1. I think they're on the M4. Is it M5 now, I think? Processor. Yes, when they started doing that, they were really nice. Mardy basically says, I found the Apple, put my teeth back in, Apple ecosystem to be very expensive. But for only one device, yeah, you might be able to afford it. So like I say, what Apple does really well is it integrates, the laptop, the iPhone, anything along those lines. It basically hooks in and meshes up really nicely. Well, the repairing of Apple stuff, just like with most hardware, Apple tends to ask you to go back to the Apple centers, but the support they give is really nice. If you've got a problem, you can make a booking, you can take your device in, and they will look after you. It's kind of like going to a 4-star restaurant. You kind of turn up and they will look after you and greet you round. Whereas if you have a Windows one, you turn up at a Windows repair center and they make you sit on a dirty chair and give you coffee out of a coffee machine rather than a fresh brew. It's not always true. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yes. Marcos loves it. One day I will buy an iMac 27-inch and a Ford Mustang. One thing I would say, one thing I don't like about some of the Mac environments is, okay, the iMacs, I mean, they do PCs that are like this nowadays, don't they? Is that the iMacs themselves, you can't do much with them. You've got a 27-inch screen. That is your 27-inch screen. You know, in 5 years' time, when everyone's running off of 32-inch screens, you're going to be sat there with your 27-inch screen looking at everyone going, why is my screen so small? You know, can you change the size of no, you can't. You know, it's that sort of thing. That's why I think Mac Minis are great. But can I upgrade a Mac Mini? No. So it's that end of things that kind of annoys me a little bit. But they are beautiful when they work. And I'd love to have a drive in your Mustang when you get it. Okay, have we got any more questions for people? I'm going to stop the share there before I hand you back to Rasha for some final words.